What up, SMC? Great to see you. We all have times in our life, decisions we've made that we regret, right? Times where we didn't or did do something that we wish we could go back and do a little differently. I've got a lot of those in my life. They're called my kids. I kid. I love my kids. I've got a lot of these in my life. Here's one that sticks out. Back when I was 15, my parents had bought a brand new car. Here's a picture of it. Doesn't look like much. This is called a GMC Typhoon. It looks like a GMC Jimmy or a Chevy Trailblazer, but what they did to this car is they dropped the engine out. They put a turbocharged Corvette engine in this car called the GMC Typhoon. It was faster than the Ferraris and Lamborghinis of its day. Amazing car. It was a monster in disguise. Well, about when my parents bought this new car, they also built a new home. And my dad one day asked me if I wanted to move our car, his car, my parents' car, into our new house. Well, I'm 15. I'm like, of course. Why are you even asking? He just said, be careful. And I was like, yeah. I go downstairs. I put on a hat. I grab my favorite rap CD. I go into the car. I turn the car on. I lean the seat back. I throw in the CD right above the cassette player. I turn the music up loud. I think I rolled the windows down a little bit. I am fired up. I'm like, this is going to be awesome. Remember, I'm moving this car 25 feet, but I am milking this thing for everything it's worth. I lean back in the car, turn the music up, pull it into drive, and just start inching forward. I get where I'm probably 10, 15 feet away from where I need to stop. They had one of those tennis balls, that would show you where you needed to stop, and so I press on the brake. But something peculiar happened. Instead of stopping and slowing down, I don't just speed up. Remember, this has a turbocharged Corvette engine. I peel out in our garage directly into our brand new house. I smashed my parents' brand new car into their brand new house. I hit the house so hard that it moved our staircase 6 to 8 inches over, put a hole in the wall in our garage, jammed up the front end of the car. And my dad is not the type of man that would see a situation like this and say, son, it's okay. We'll get it fixed. That's not the way he operates. I don't want that type of moment to be SMC for you. What do I mean? What I mean is my dad told me 2 simple words: be careful. That's it. And I didn't listen to him. I cared far more about my feelings and what I wanted than his instruction. Jesus talks about this very thing, not driving a car into a house, but he talks about what do you do with information that you receive? What do you do with it? And so at the end of Matthew 5, 6, and 7, it's the longest teaching we have of Jesus's, at least the longest recorded teaching. And at the end of Matthew 7, it's called the Sermon on the Mount. Here's how he concludes it. I want you to read this. Don't miss what he says. Check this out. He says, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. Now listen to this. The rains came, the streams rose, and the winds blew, and they beat against that house. But it did not fall. Why? Because it was built on the rock. Okay, it'd be great if it ends there. But Jesus doesn't end there. Look what he says after this. He says, but everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a fool, is a foolish man who builds his house on the sand. The rains came, the streams rose, the winds blew, and they beat against that house. And it doesn't just fall, it fell with a great crash. Did you hear what he's saying? He's saying it doesn't matter what you learn. It doesn't matter the information you know. It matters what you do with what you know. By you coming to SMC, What you do from here is either going to elevate or devastate your life. He doesn't give a middle ground. Everybody got a note card, or you should have. It's under your chair. It might be in a cup holder next to you. We didn't know where everyone was sitting, and so you might have to reach over a couple seats and grab them. I want everybody to grab that note card. And we asked you guys to bring a pen. If you didn't bring a pen, that's okay. Someone on your row hopefully loves Jesus enough to send you the pen. Okay, and here's what I want to have happen. Okay, I want you to take that note card out, and on the top of your note card, here's what I want you to write, because this is what Jesus is saying. Okay, write this in big letters on the top of your note card. Information without application is devastation. Information without application is devastation. I know that some of you are having to look up to remember how to spell information and devastation. I've had the amazing privilege of getting to teach all three of my kids how to water ski. I taught them how to ski when they were ages 2 and 3. And pictures are worth 1,000 words. So here's my first son, or my oldest. Nope, other pictures. That's later. The skiing pictures of little kids. Nope. You guys are. These are some pivotal pictures you're getting to see before I want you to see them. There should be some pictures of 3 little kids skiing. Anyway, Mason was 2 when he learned how to ski. Hopefully it'll come up. And when Mason was 2, he gets to ski, and I taught him 3 simple things. Skiing's really easy. It's about keeping your arms straight, your knees bent, and your eyes on the boat. And so Mason's 2 years old, and hopefully they'll find that pic, and Mason skis. And for the next year, I would come home from work, and I would ask Mace, remember, he's 2 years old. I'd say, Mace, how was your day? And he'd look at me, he goes, Vent water skiing, hind the boat. I don't know why he just sounded German there. I'm not good with accents, but that's what he'd say almost every day. That's how pumped he was. It was January. Mace, how was your day? Went water skiing behind the boat. Rylan, my next oldest, she learned how to ski when she was 2. She was adorable. She didn't really want to go, and so we did what most parents do. We bribed her with chocolate. And when she was a little girl, she didn't say chocolate. She would say chocolat. And so I said, hey, Rai, you ready to go skiing? She goes, I don't want to go. And I said, I'll give you chocolate. And she goes, chocolat. And she skis. And she was so cute. And we come back after she skis, and I'm like, Rai, you did it. You skied. I'm so proud of you. And she goes, where's my chocolat? That's all she cared about was chocolate. My youngest daughter, Kaylee, she learned how to ski when she was 3. And Kaylee she's a trooper. She skis, and she goes for a little while, and then she crashes. And I come back to her. She's 3 years old, and she's cold. She's kind of whimpering. I'm like, you did it, Kaylee. I'm so proud of you. Do you want to go again? And she goes, yeah, Daddy. I'm like, awesome, let's go again. And so we get her up again, and she skis again, and she wrecks even harder. Her hair's all wet. She's freezing cold. And I come back. I'm like, Kaylee, you did it. You want to do it again? And she's crying. And she goes, yeah, Daddy. And she skis again, and she wrecks a 3rd time, and I come back. I don't even know why I kept asking her. I just knew she'd say yes. And so I'm like, Kaylee, you did it 3 times. You want to go again? And she is freezing. Her eyes are, she's red-eyed. And I'm like, you want to do it again? She goes, yeah, Daddy. And she skied 4 times, wrecked every time. She skied. She got up. She skied for a while, but then she'd wreck. Here's why I tell you that. Because my kids, it's not that they were good athletes. They were 2. It's not that they had a ton of information. They didn't. They're 2. They had a choice to make when they got on those skis. Were they going to listen to their dad and do what he said, or were they going to do things on their own? And if they do it on their own, they weren't going to ski. It wasn't going to work for them. This is really similar to where you and I sit and I stand today. You've all learned some incredible truths about God. You've learned some incredible things probably about yourself. The question isn't what have you learned? The question is, will you apply it? Will you do what you have been taught? See, in Jesus' time, Matthew 5, 6, and 7, that crowd was very similar to this crowd. There were two types of people in that crowd. And both types heard everything Jesus said. He didn't give different messages to them. They all heard the same thing. One group of people heard it, and they applied it. They did what he said. And Jesus says, you're wise. When life hits, he didn't say if life hits, right? The rain falling, the streams rising, the wind blowing, that's life. Difficulty, temptation, trial, that will come for every one of us. He says, when that comes for you, no problem. You're going to stand because you practice the things that I preached. But there was another group of people, heard all the same stuff, all the same message. In fact, I think of some of them sitting in that crowd kind of elbowing each other saying, man, this is Jesus. He's a pretty good teacher. I like this guy. Did you hear about him turning water to wine? Maybe he'll do that today. And then they looked at each other and they said, all right, let's go back to do what we always do. No change. And Jesus says, those people are fools. This is the same. You guys have all heard the same messages. You've taken in the same content. You've gone to breakouts and heard tons of other info. You've gone to establishers. You've learned tons of information. And in this same crowd, there are wise people and there are fools. And the question is, which one are you? Information without application is devastation. Jesus doesn't give a middle ground. He doesn't give a neutral. He doesn't say some will apply and they're going to go on to be an elevated life. And then there will be some that don't apply and they're devastated. And then there will be some that just kind of maintain and they'll be okay. No, he didn't say that. He says either you apply what you learned at this conference and you stand firm, or you don't, and your life will fall with a great crash. There's no middle ground. See, I'm amazed. Every year I come to SMC, God teaches me, faithfully teaches me new truths. You may not believe this. This is my 28th SMC. I've been to 28 straight SMCs since my freshman year in college until now, 28 of them. And guess what? Every single year I learn something new. Every year. And you may say, wow, how is that possible? I've come to 3 of these things. I feel like I hear some of the same messages. No. I learn something new every time. There's a new breakout. The speakers that are up here, they're giving you different content. And every year, I get to this day. I get to January 5th, and I have a choice to make. You have a choice to make. What are you going to do with what you learned? It does not matter what you learned. It matters what you do with what you learned. Information without application is devastation. Well, I've thought about this as I was prepping this talk. Why is application so difficult? Why is it so hard? Researchers have actually done polls, and it almost always ends up in the top 5 of the greatest fears that people have. And you know what that fear is? Change. Application equals change. Underneath where you wrote information without application is devastation, I want you to write application equals change. It's impossible for you to take this information and not be changed. But this is why some of you won't apply what you've learned. Because you're afraid to change. It really boils down to one of 2 things. Either you're afraid of it or you're too prideful to change. Those are the only 2 options. Some of you don't want to change because you're afraid of what your friends will think. You're afraid of what your family, you're afraid of what your boyfriend or girlfriend will think. You're just afraid of what people will think. If you actually obey God, if you do the things that God has commanded you, if you're honest with yourself, you're just fearful of what people might think. But others of you, that's not you. You're just too prideful. You come to these things, you hear all these things, and you're like, man, I've got it all figured out. I've heard this before. You're just comfortable with who you are, and you're too prideful to change. I want you to think about this. Think about your life if you never changed. Go back to a time when you're a little uncomfortable with who you were. Imagine if you never changed from that person. I got to go back to Colorado. My family and I, my wife's family, my family live in Colorado. And I got to look at some old family photos. You got a little precursor to this. But look at how I would look and what I would be like if I never changed. Okay, this is me when I was about 12. Not bad. Not a bad-looking dude. I don't know if you can see the flow, but I got a little lettuce back there. You see that? Here's a picture of the back side of my head, just so you can see it. Look at that. That's some flow, baby. I don't know where mullets stand. They're kind of in and out, but I would still have a mullet. If I never changed, I would have had a mullet from the age of like 6 until now. It's embarrassing. Some of you wonder, man, what does a demon-possessed person look like? Well, here's a pic. Not this one, this next one. Who does that? When a mom says smile and then you do this kid's got issues. I mean, look at my brother and my dad. My mom's like, smile. My brother's like, nice there. My dad's nice. And then there's me. Like, imagine if this kid never changed. Okay, you might think it got a little better. Okay, I'm 12, 13, 14. You might think it got better. Let's go to high school. Here I am in high school. I don't even know really what to comment on this. And I know what some of you might be thinking. You're like, oh, he probably just got back from a trip in Mexico, right? Like that. No, I didn't. I thought this was cool. I don't know why I did this. And look at the picture. I'm not trying to like clown. I'm not like, this would be funny. I think I'm awesome. Look at me. I think I'm tough. I'm like, I'm cold right there, right? Okay, you might think it got better, right? Okay, this is high school. I had a lot of problems in high school. Maybe it gets better after that. Okay, look at this next pic. Look at that chin music. You like that chin music? Come on, Chad, is that Riz? That's Riz right there. You know that. You know that, right? And you're like, hey, that's probably late high school, right? I had a kid. I was married with a child. I did a wedding the next day. I took this picture and I did a wedding the next day. I got problems. I need to change, okay? You don't want that guy continuing to walk around college campuses. That dude's getting arrested. I'm amazed that I have had so many different hairstyles. I had mohawks when I was married, had children. It's very curious as I've looked back. And I'm like, man, we're not afraid to change hairstyles. We're not afraid to change clothing. Technology, right? No one's rocking this phone anymore because they think it makes them look important. If you still have a phone like this, you look like an idiot. Right? No one's afraid to get the new iPhone because they just don't want to change. Although we all have that friend that has had an iPhone way too long. It's broken, it's busted. You need to get a new phone. But I really do wonder, why is it in some of these less important things in life, hairstyles, clothing, technology, that we don't resist change? We're willing to change. But when it comes to the most important factors of life and arenas of life, in particular our spiritual life, we stiff-arm it. We resist it. We hesitate. And again, it comes down to the reality. Either you're fearful of it or you're too prideful to change. All of us in this room have learned tons of stuff in the last four days. And if we're honest, God has tugged on our hearts and on our minds to change. You know He has. I'm not a really touchy-feely person, but I have felt Him tugging me to grow and develop and mature in some ways. And the question is, will you? It's not whether you heard him. It's not whether you learned some new truths. The question is, what will you do with what you learned? If you leave this conference unchanged, God is saying to you, this isn't me saying this isn't Stumo, this is Jesus saying this to you. You're a fool. If you leave this conference unchanged, don't miss this, you're a fool. Information without application is devastation. The Bible is meant to change us, to make us more like Christ. And if you don't believe me that application and doing, if this isn't enough, Jesus, just 3 verses before this, in Matthew 21 through 23, just before this, here's what he says in verse 21. Look at this, it's on the screen. He says this, "Not everyone who says to me, 'Lord, Lord,' will enter the kingdom of heaven. But what? Only he who does. Only he who does the will of my Father. Not he who knows the will of my Father. Not he who understands the will of my Father. Only he who does the will of my Father." What you do with what you know is what matters. In Luke 6, it's not on the screen. Luke 6, I think it's verse 46. Here's how Jesus says this same thing. He says, "Why do you call me Lord, Lord?" Some of you in this room call him Lord, Lord. And then he says this to you. Here's the question he has for you. "But do not do what I say." Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I say? Jesus is concerned with you doing the things that he has asked you to do. But some of you in this room, this isn't you. You're not the type of person. You're not a fool. You're not a person that's not going to apply this. That's why you came here. You couldn't wait to get to SMC because you couldn't wait to learn some new things so you could grow and become more like Jesus. And for you, your life will never be the same. Right? Elevated or devastated, and your life will be elevated. And so I want you to flip your card over, and I want you to write this on the back side of that card. Because here's the flip side of what Jesus says. He says information with application is transformation. Information with application is transformation. God wants to transform your life. If you apply the info you have, elevation, transformation is what's in store for you. I want you to hear this. God's not concerned with how you walked into this conference. We all came into this conference in a slightly different place. Some of you came to this conference kind of broken. Some of you came to this conference confused and concerned. Some of you came to this conference not really even knowing why you came to this conference. Some of you came to this conference feeling guilty and shame over things that you've done. Some of you came to this conference because you were kind of lazy over the break and you're wondering, man, what's this conference going to do for me? God is not concerned with how you came to this conference. God is concerned with how you're going to walk out of this conference. The same was true for the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5, 6, and 7. Those people came to Jesus' talks in all different places, and Jesus was not concerned with how they came. He wanted them to come, but he was concerned. That's why his last words in Matthew 7 are, "If you don't apply this, you're a fool. But if you do, you're a wise person, and you have built your house on the rock. And when life hits, you don't have to worry. You're going to stand." I want to make sure that you guys get this. When Jesus gives us this teaching, Matthew 7, he's not giving us moral advice. He's not saying, try a little harder to be good. That's what it means to apply the teaching of Jesus. That's not what he's saying. And if you apply the good things, if you become a little more moral, then your life's on the rock. That's not what he's saying. Jesus is saying he is the rock. To build your life on a rock-solid foundation, that's him. That's the conclusion of the Sermon on the Mount. It's not try to do these things in your own power, and if you try to do them well enough, then you'll have a good, sturdy life. That's not what he's saying. He's actually saying you can't do that. That's what you've done your whole life. You've tried your whole life to build your life on different things. That's the sand. He's saying, I'm the rock. I am the firm foundation. If you want to handle all of the pressures and all of the junk of life, he says, I'm the foundation. I'm the rock. And I don't think all of you are thinking this, but some of you are probably wondering how. How can he say that? How can he say he's the rock? Well, it's really simple. He was willing to leave the comforts of heaven, to come down and live a life that you and I could not live. If you and I were given 1,000 lifetimes with perfect recollection, guess what? You would still screw it up. You would still sin. But Jesus didn't. He lived a life we could not live. And then he died in our place for our sins. And then he rose from the grave. He defeated death. And he says, you want life? You want a firm foundation? I'm him. Right? Y'all know that I'm him? No. No one else is him. Okay, I don't care what any athlete says, I'm him. No, you ain't him. Jesus is him. He's him. And he says, I'm the foundation. That's how you live a sturdy life. Okay, so for some of you that have come to this conference, I don't know where you're at. But for some of you, you know you're not following him. You know that you have never fully given your life to him. And I've done this long enough, I know the excuses. I'll do it later. And you keep putting him off. And I want you to know what God is saying to you. Quit putting me off. He is lovingly and kindly and caringly and patiently and now urgently telling you, give your life to me. Jesus is saying, I gave my life for you. Give me your life. Quit putting him off. There's others in this room, you've been playing the game. And you've been playing the game far too long. It's not about information anymore. You could ace any type of test on who Jesus is or the scriptures. You didn't just get information this week. You've got information for a long time, and you've played the game. And if you're honest with yourself, and probably your friends know, you say you're a Christian, they know you're not, and you know you're not. The way you think, the way you speak, the way you act, you're not following Christ. You're just playing a game. This is not a game. This Jesus thing, my parents, when I first started following Christ, and some of my friends said this would be a fad. This was a fad for you. This is a hobby. No, this ain't a fad. This ain't a hobby. This is life. And I've given my life to him. And God's telling you, quit playing the game. You need to bow your knee, fully bow your knee, and commit to follow him the rest of your life. You want to know who some of the most miserable people I know? They're people that don't have enough gospel to fully commit their life to Christ, and just enough gospel to not fully commit to sin. And they're miserable. They're lukewarm, fake, wannabe Christians. And that's some of you in this room. And God is telling you, he's imploring you, he's begging you, I'm begging you. Quit playing the game. He loves you, and he wants you to follow him. And so if that's you, either of those categories, the band's going to come up in a little bit, and when they come up, you need to do business with God. You need to give your life to him. But that's not all of you. Some of you in this room, you're committed to him. I don't know if you've been committed to him for 5 years or 5 months. Maybe it's been 5 minutes. But that's not you. You've committed your life to him, and you can't wait to continue to follow him. And God wants to do things in and through you that you never thought possible. You never imagined he could do. And so for you, you also still need to apply the things that you've learned. And so I don't know what it is for you. Some of you need to just commit to getting daily time with God. Some of you need to increase your time with God. You've been getting daily time with Him, but you need to increase it. Some of you need to not just memorize one verse a week. You need to start memorizing chunks of the Scriptures, chapters of the Bible, maybe books of the Bible. Some of you need to man up. You need to woman up and plug into the ministry on your campus and be willing to get around some men and women that will call you out when you're out of bounds, that will encourage you when you need to be encouraged, that will pray for you when you need to be prayed for, that will challenge you when you need to be challenged. You need to get into a small group. Some of you need to quit withholding the gospel from others. You know truth. You're following truth. You know there's people and family members and coworkers in your life that God has in your life that you know you need to share the gospel with. And for a myriad of reasons, you haven't. And for you, you need to write down some names and start praying for them daily and asking God to give you the opportunity to share with them. I pray B-O-B every day, Bob, almost every day. The first B, burden for the lost. I want God to give me a burden for the lost. O, opportunity to share. And the last B, boldness to take that opportunity. Some of you have been praying for an opportunity to share the gospel with your friend for like a year. You're with that person all the time. It's a useless prayer. God's like, are you serious? You've been praying this for a year. I have given you countless opportunities. You're with them every day. You have meals with them all the time. Quit praying for opportunities. You need to pray for boldness. You just need to pray that you actually pull the trigger. All of you need to apply for Kaleo. All of you at least need to say, God, I'm willing to put my summer on the altar and say, I'm open-handed with my summer. If you're a person that claims to be a follower of Christ and you know that Jesus wants to make you more like Himself, I'm not saying all of you need to go to Kaleo. In fact, we probably don't have spots for all of you. But you at least need to say, God, I'm willing to pray about it. I'm willing to at least apply and consider it. Okay, I don't know. There's a myriad of things that you guys could apply. I want to tell you this last thing. There was a woman a long, long time ago named Corrie ten Boom. Some of you have heard of her. Corrie ten Boom and her family were watchmakers. They were Dutch watchmakers. But that's not what they're known for. What they're known for is that they used to take Jews and they would hide them in their home, that when the Nazis came during the Holocaust, they were trying to keep them from concentration camps. And they became famous in the area that they were in because all these Jews are trying to avoid the Nazis so they don't go to concentration camps. Well, Corrie ten Boom and her family ended up getting caught, and they got sent to the Rasenbrook concentration camp. She wrote a book called The Hiding Place. Phenomenal book. I'd encourage you to get it. But Corrie ten Boom has a quote, and I've never forgot it since I read it. And as I was prepping this talk, I started to think, okay, change is hard. And why is change so hard? And here's why I think change is hard. Part of the reason change is tough is because it has to do with the future. It has to do with some of the unknown. And here's what Corrie said. Okay, look at this. It should be on the screen. She said this: never be afraid to trust an unknown future to a known God. Never be afraid to trust an unknown future to a known God. If God really is who He says He is, and I believe He is, if Jesus really is who He says He is, and I wholeheartedly believe that He is, then He has a way better idea about how my future should be than I do. So I'm going to invite the band back up. And I want to ask you just to do two things, okay? The first is this. I want you to take that note card, and at least for the next month, I want you to put it somewhere that you're going to see it on a daily basis. Okay, maybe make it the bookmark in your Bible. Maybe put it on the visor or the dash of your car. I tell people this all the time with these note cards. Put it on the top of your toilet. You'll see it every day if you put it there. But put it somewhere you're going to see it every day. And here's the question I want you to be reminded every day. Here's the question I want you to ask yourself. Which side of this card is going to be true of me? Am I a wise person or am I a fool? Okay, here's the second thing I want to ask you to do. as the band plays, they're going to play for a few minutes. I want you to get out your notes. Okay, and I want you to write down a few things to apply. Don't write 20 things down. You're not going to do 20 things. Write down 3 to 5 things. 3 to 5 things that stick out from the course of the last 4 days that you'll apply over the course of the next year, 2 years, 10 years, 20 years. I want to say one last thing. I'm so proud of you for coming to this conference. You could do a lot of different things with your January. So proud of you. You coming to this conference says something about you. But how you leave this conference says more about you. What will you do with what you've been entrusted with?